So welcome back to managerial accounting, and this last little mini lecture is relates to objective 4, which describe and illustrate the use of a cost production report and evaluating a company's performance. So remember when that big thing I put up on the board last night, when we did the cost of production report, we actually figured out the cost per equivalent unit, and then we multiplied by the equivalent units, and then we were able to figure out the cost that we had to account for in terms of the beginning inventory, the cost of goods that were started and completed, the cost of goods that were transferred out, and the cost of goods that ended up in the ending work in process. The only way we were able to do that was to actually compute the cost per equivalent unit. And again, I know last night when I asked the question, I know it had been a week when I asked someone to distinguish between uh, whole units and equivalent units that no one answered. So equivalent units is actually the measure of the work done this period. So the equivalent units is going to be different than the units that we have to account for. The units we have to account for are called the whole units. The equivalent units are the units of work actually done this period. Right? And we're going to have separate core, and then what we're going to do, the equivalent units are going to be different for materials, and they're going to be different for for conversion costs, and this is going to have to do with both the beginning and ending inventory. We know that conversion costs are 100% complete with regard to materials and with regard to conversion costs, but both beginning inventory and ending inventory work in process are going to vary in terms of what percentage work was done this period. And also remember in chapter 1, we said that we were going to plan, we were going to measure, we were going to evaluate, and we were going to control. So in this case, we want to evaluate a company's performance. We want to take a look at how well they are doing managing costs. And one of the ways to do this is to get the cost per equivalent unit of an item that we're concerned about. So would it be energy costs or oil costs or materials costs? We get the cost per equivalent unit, and then we can compare one period to the next, and then we can explore that and see what's going on, whether the costs are going up and then we're going down. And then we can do the last function of management, which is control. We can take actually corrective action. So with that background, let me call up the slides. This will be a brief little mini lecture. I'll try not to be too long-winded here. So we're going to focus in on the costs included in the beginning inventory. So the beginning inventory of work in process shows $5,000 for materials and 1,225 in terms of conversion costs. So we've got $6,225 worth of costs that we have to account for. And what we'd want to be able to do is to say, okay, if that was the beginning inventory as of July 1st, how does that compare with the beginning inventory, the cost of some item with regard to how maybe it was in June? Okay. So what we do is we have to get the equivalent units that's measured in there. So 5,000 gallons, and again, this is beginning work in process, so you can assume those 5,000 were fully complete. And the conversion costs were 70% complete. So when we try to get the equivalent units, it's not 5,000, it's 5,000 times 0.7, which would be 35. So included in that, if we want to get the cost of that beginning inventory of 6,225, when we want to get the materials cost, it's based on 5,000 gallons. And we want to get conversion cost, it's based on 3,500 gallons, which is indeed what we do here in the next slide. So we're told that materials cost were 5,000, and we know that those materials were 100% complete. So 5,000 times 5,000 divided by 5,000. So my cost per equivalent unit of materials is $1. And my conversion cost, it's not 5,000 gallons. They were only 70% complete. So it's 5,000 multiplied by 0.7, which is 3,500. So it's actually 1,225 divided by 3,500. And that gives you the cost per equivalent unit there for conversion costs of 35. So now if we got those as of July 1st, we can compare those to what they were as of June 1st. And if we compare them as of June 1st, you can see that the cost per equivalent unit of material went from $1 to $1.10. Why did those costs go up? We want to explore why those costs went up and take corrective action. And also the conversion cost actually went down. Why did they go from 35 cents to 30 cents? So the only way that we know they went up or down is to get the cost per equivalent unit for this period. This period's beginning inventory, July 1st, and compare it to what it was on June 1st. Right? So that's how we actually compare the costs. Now let's take a look at a little question here. This will be kind of a practice multiple choice question. The cost of production report is often used by managers for analyzing the change in conversion and direct materials cost per. So do we use whole units? Do we use equivalent units between periods? Do we do partial units, or do we do completed units between periods? So as you know, we use B. We use equivalent units between the periods to compare the costs. Right? So what I want you to do now is I want you to go to exercise 8 on page 125. And I will attempt to go with you there. And let's see if I can do this. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to go now share. And there it is, I think. Yep. Okay, so here we go. The energy cost consumed in producing goods in the baking department for Pan Company was $14,875 and 14,615 in June and July, respectively. Okay, so the costs for June are 14,875. Costs for July are 14,615. And we want to see what is are we doing a better job managing energy costs in June or July? So what we need to be able to do, and they're not going to ask us to calculate here, they recognize you're tired, and this is the last little video lecture, so they're going to give you the equivalent units. And it says the number of equivalent units produced in June was 42,500 pounds and 39,500 for July, respectively. So, and it says on that basis, evaluate the change in the cost of energy between the 2 months. So what we can do is we can take the energy cost and we can actually compute it on the basis of equivalent units, and we can ask ourselves, what is happening to the trend in cost? So this is not a complex calculation. Just take the cost for June, divide by the equivalent units, take the cost for July, divide by the equivalent units, come up with a unit cost for electricity, for energy cost per equivalent unit, and then ask yourself, is it going up or is it going down? So pause the tape here and go ahead and do that, and then come on back. So this should take you about 5 minutes. So get the cost, the energy cost per equivalent unit for June and July, and then come on back. Go ahead, compute it, and then put this on pause, compute it, and then come back, and I'll walk you through the answer. Okay, welcome back. So the energy cost per pound in June was 14,875 divided by the equivalent units of 42.5. So the energy cost per equivalent unit was 35 cents in June. And in July, it was 14,615, and the equivalent units was less. It was 39,500. So although we produced less equivalent units, notice that the energy cost ticked up. Okay, so the cost of energy has increased by 2 cents per pound between June and July, indicating inefficiency in the use of energy. Could also reflect an increase in the utility rates as well, but they're the way we want to investigate it. And the only way we can investigate it is to get the cost. And if you want to compare one period to the other, you got to get the cost per equivalent unit. All right. So that concludes the 2 little pieces here on additional pieces on the on this chapter. You're going to go ahead now, having done these things, you're going to go ahead and do the homework. And I'm looking at the homework here. The basic exercises look very similar, almost verbatim to what we did in class. Exercise, the one that you have to do, the second to last exercise or third to last exercise, looks like you have to use the chart very similar to one we did in class. When you have to consider that's the cost of production report, you're going to have to do journal entries. And the big problem at the end is not only are you going to do journal entries, which are going to look very similar to the last little mini lecture I gave you, but you're going to have to track those journal entries to the different accounts. So you're going to have to set up T accounts for materials, work in process, spinning, work in process, tufting, and finished goods. And you're also going to have to analyze the factory overhead account. Remember, the factory overhead accounts You can have a separate one for each production department, and you're going to have both debits and credits to that. We want you to come up with what the ending balance is in the factory overhead when you compare the costs incurred to the overhead applied. Okay, so I hope you found that useful, and look forward to your Chapter 3 homework, and we will answer any questions you got stuck. I'll leave time on Tuesday to go over that. And then next Tuesday and the next Tuesday, we will get into the next chapter, which is Chapter 4. And remember, the first exam covers Chapter 1 through 4. So I hope you enjoy your weekend. It was nice to see that the temperature got above freezing. I stepped in a puddle when I got out of the car, which that's a good forecast this spring. Adios, au revoir, hasta luego. See you all again soon. Take care, folks.